A king walked into a Harlem Garden. And what happened next? Nobody planned, nobody scripted, and nobody could have predicted. Stay with us because this story will make you smile, make you think, and remind you why genuine human moments are still the most powerful thing in the world. Welcome back to Royal Report Daily, your most trusted source for royal news and exclusive coverage. Today we are bringing you something completely different. Not a palace scandal, not a constitutional crisis, not a legal battle. Today we are bringing you pure, unscripted, completely wonderful joy. Because King Charles III just had one of the most unexpectedly human afternoons of his entire royal life. And it happened not in Windsor Castle, not in Buckingham Palace, but in a community garden in Harlem, New York. And we are breaking down every single beautiful moment right here. Don't forget to subscribe to Royal Report Daily and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single update. Let's set the stage first, because context matters here. King Charles was on day 3 of an official United States state visit. Now, state visits are famously rigid and precisely choreographed affairs. There are motorcades within motorcades. Formal dinners with more forks than any human being should ever need. Speeches read from prepared texts, handshakes timed to the second, and security details so thick you couldn't throw a paper airplane without it being intercepted by 3 different agencies. Every word, every movement, every smile is planned weeks in advance. And then somebody scheduled King Charles to spend an afternoon at Harlem Grown. If you haven't heard of Harlem Grown, let us tell you about this organization right now, because they deserve every second of attention this royal visit is about to bring them. Harlem Grown is a grassroots community-powered nonprofit based in Upper Manhattan. What they do is nothing short of extraordinary. They take vacant lots, forgotten urban spaces, cracked concrete corners of one of the most densely packed cities on Earth, and they turn them into thriving gardens, farms, and classrooms where children learn to grow their own food, understand ecosystems, and appreciate where their meals actually come from. But it's not just gardening. Harlem Grown feeds children. They provide healthy meals and snacks. They teach nutrition. They partner with local schools and affordable housing developers. They grow mushrooms in their basement, pink and yellow oyster mushrooms, inoculated right there in their own facility. They do hydroponics for rainy days. They raise chickens. They plant lavender with kids who name their plants after NBA superstars. This is a place built entirely from love, from community, from the stubborn belief that children deserve access to green spaces, fresh food, and the dignity of learning how to grow something with their own hands. And into this space walked the King of England. Stay tuned to Royal Report Daily. We bring you the stories that truly matter. Think about that for a moment. This is a man whose family owns castles, whose ancestral estate includes Windsor Castle, Balmoral, and Sandringham, whose household staff likely includes an actual person whose job involves the maintenance of royal chickens at his own farm at Highgrove. He has been surrounded by gardens his entire life. He is famously passionate about organic farming and environmental sustainability. And here is a well-documented fact about King Charles that most people forget. He talks to his plants. Literally talks to them. This is not a rumor. This is a confirmed reality about the King of England. And yet somehow the moment he stepped into Harlem Grown, all of that went out the window. Because Harlem Grown's plants talk back, through the children who tend them. Here is the moment. The one that started it all. The one that has been shared millions of times across every platform imaginable. King Charles is watching children work in the garden. There is dirt. There are plants. There is the organized, cheerful chaos that only exists in spaces where children are actually engaged, actually excited, actually present. The king leans in. He is watching a child with her hands in the soil, working something, patting, mixing, pressing. And he asks with the genuine curiosity of a man who has spent a lifetime caring about horticulture. Are you mixing that into the mouth, or is this? He doesn't even finish the sentence. Because the child looks up at him and does something that no courtier, no prime minister, no head of state has done to King Charles in a very long time. She just laughs. Not a polite diplomatic laugh. Not a carefully modulated chuckle designed to make the king feel comfortable. A real laugh. A child's laugh. The kind that says without any words at all, "What are you even talking about?" And King Charles laughed too. The entire garden erupted. Staff, volunteers, organizers, security detail, cameras, everyone broke. Because there is something about witnessing a genuine, unscripted, completely human moment of connection that cracks the armor of formality every single time. And this was absolutely one of those moments. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to Royal Report Daily for more exclusive coverage. Now let's talk about the real star of this visit. Because King Charles was wonderful and we love him for showing up fully. But let us be completely clear about something. The children of Harlem Grown ran this entire afternoon. There was one interaction in particular that has been making people stop their scrolling mid-feed and rewind. King Charles, in the way that adults do when they are trying to connect with a young person, asked one of the girls about school. A perfectly reasonable, perfectly ordinary question. And she answered with the kind of complete, unapologetic confidence that only a child who has absolutely nothing to prove can deliver. She mentioned how old she was. She told him she was doing fine. And then King Charles, perhaps sensing he had interrupted something, perhaps just being the polite and well-mannered man that he genuinely is, said, "How am I interrupting you?" The girl, without missing a single beat, looked at him and said, "Actually, I'm done with all of my homework. I should do it ahead of time." The garden exploded again. Let us unpack that for a second because this moment deserves it. A child was visited by the King of England. The King of England, a man trained since birth in the art of formal conversation, who has spoken before Parliament, before the United Nations, before gathered heads of state from across the globe. And in the middle of their conversation, she pivoted completely naturally, with zero awareness of how magnificently funny it was, to letting him know that she stays completely on top of her academic responsibilities. She did not ask him about the crown. She did not curtsy. She did not want a selfie or a souvenir. She wanted him to know that she is organized, that she plans ahead, that homework does not sneak up on her. These children were not performing for the king. They were simply being themselves, loudly, joyfully, brilliantly themselves. And that right there is the most radical thing that happened in that garden. Not the king coming to Harlem, but the children of Harlem absolutely refusing to be anyone other than exactly who they are, even in the presence of royalty. Don't miss a single update. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. Now we cannot talk about this visit without talking about the chickens. Because the very first image that came out of this visit, the one that stopped people cold on their social media feeds, was King Charles III, dressed with his customary understated elegance, feeding chickens with a group of school children in Upper Manhattan. There is something fundamentally funny about this image, and we say that with complete affection. Here is a man whose day typically begins with correspondence delivered on a silver tray, whose meetings are with cabinet ministers and ambassadors, whose afternoons might involve a state luncheon or the opening of a parliament. And on day 3 of an international state visit to the most powerful country on earth, he is tossing grain at chickens with 8-year-olds. And he is loving it. That is the thing that gets you. He is not tolerating it. He is not performing enjoyment for the cameras. King Charles is famously and genuinely passionate about sustainable agriculture. He has his own working farm at Highgrove that he has tended for decades. He is the kind of person who, when confronted with a chicken, is genuinely delighted by the chicken. He probably has opinions about the chicken. But more than the chickens themselves, it is what they represent that matters. Harlem Grown keeps chickens as part of their urban agriculture model because teaching children that eggs come from animals, that food comes from living systems, is exactly the kind of education that changes lives. And King Charles, a man who has been talking about this exact philosophy for longer than most of the children's parents have been alive, understood that immediately. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily and stay ahead of every royal story. Now we need to talk about Steph Curry. Not the actual Steph Curry, though imagine if he had shown up. That would have broken the internet entirely. We are talking about the lavender plant that a child named Steph Curry during King Charles's visit. The children were being guided through a planting exercise. Each child had a lavender seedling. As part of the exercise to build connection and investment in their plant, they were asked to give it a name. What would you name yours? One child, without a moment's hesitation, announced Steph Curry. The laughter was immediate and absolute. King Charles, who in the interests of full transparency probably does not watch a great deal of NBA basketball, responded with the genuine warm amusement of someone who may not fully know the reference, but completely appreciates the energy. Another child named theirs Sunshine. And that contrast, Steph Curry and Sunshine, side by side in the same garden bed, somehow captures everything about this visit. The collision of worlds. The unexpected poetry of it. The way children cut straight through to what is true and joyful without any of the layers adults spend their whole lives building up. What would you name your lavender plant? Drop it in the comments right now. We are reading every single one. Hit that like button and subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. Behind all the laughs and the viral moments, there is something genuinely important happening at Harlem Grown that got a spotlight during this royal visit that it absolutely deserves. When King Charles met with some of the organization's partners, the conversations were striking. Representatives from an affordable housing developer explained how their basement provides water and electricity for Harlem Grown's mushroom operation. Pink and yellow oyster mushrooms grown underground, powered by an affordable housing development's utilities. The kind of circular, community-sustaining partnership that doesn't get written up in glossy corporate reports, but keeps entire neighborhoods alive. One of the partners said with a completely straight and confident face, "We're not quite working on the East Wing at Windsor Castle, but we do affordable housing for working people." King Charles listened with what appeared to be genuine and deep interest. Not performing attention, actually giving it. The conversation moved to hydroponics, the soil-free growing systems Harlem Grown uses for indoor cultivation on rainy days when outdoor gardening isn't possible. The educator explaining it described it simply, it's space-friendly, and then moved on immediately to the next thing. King Charles nodded. He asked questions. He engaged. And here is what matters about all of this. There was no gap in the room. There was no moment where the king's world and this community's world failed to find each other. Because the values were identical. Sustainability, dignity, connection to the natural world. The belief that children deserve better than concrete and processed food. King Charles has held those values his entire adult life. Harlem Grown was built on them. And for one extraordinary afternoon, those two worlds found each other in a garden in Upper Manhattan. Royal Report Daily, bringing you the stories that truly matter. There was one more moment that deserves its own spotlight. At some point during the visit, there was a reference to chips. Chips made from hydroponic lettuce grown right there in the facility. Children who had helped grow lettuce under indoor lights, in water rather than soil, were now eating chips made from that very same lettuce. The entire cycle, grow it, learn it, eat it, understand where food comes from not as an abstract concept, but as a lived, tasted, real experience. And the response when someone noted how good they were was emphatic, but they're so good. This is the heart of what Harlem Grown does. They don't teach children about food. They teach children to have a relationship with food. And there is a profound difference. One is information. The other is transformation. Now let me be genuinely honest for a moment, because it matters. There are people who will watch this footage and say it is just optics. A carefully orchestrated moment designed to make the monarchy look warm and relevant. And that skepticism is understandable. We live in an age where everything powerful institutions do can be read as performance. But the moments that went viral from this visit were not the scripted ones. They were not the formal introductions or the prepared remarks. They were the laughs, the unfinished questions, the child announcing her homework schedule to the King of England, the lavender named after Steph Curry. Those moments cannot be scripted. Those moments happen when the person in the middle of them is genuinely present, genuinely open, genuinely willing to be surprised. King Charles has a long documented history of caring about exactly the things Harlem Grown stands for. His organic farm at Highgrove has been running since the 1980s. He founded what eventually became the Prince's Trust, supporting millions of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. He has been talking about climate, sustainability, and reconnecting communities with nature since before it was fashionable, since before it was a hashtag, since before it was a TED Talk. He used to get mocked for it. And here he is decades later in Harlem, planting lavender with children who named their seedlings after basketball players. There is a genuine thread there, and the children felt it, because children always feel it when something is real. At one point during the visit, one of the Harlem Grown educators said something that has stayed with us ever since. She was explaining why the children relate so strongly to the people who run these programs. And she said, they relate to her because she is their community. She is love. And that is the circle. The circle. Think about that for a moment. In one sentence, she described the entire philosophy of what makes a community organization like Harlem Grown work. It is not a program. It is not a service delivery model. It is a circle, a closed loop of love where the people who teach are from the community, where the children who learn become the community, where the food that grows feeds the community, where the circle sustains itself. And then King Charles arrived from the most famous family in the world. And he stepped into the circle, and the circle held him for an afternoon. There is something profoundly hopeful about that. In a world that feels much of the time like it is fracturing along every possible fault line, political, economic, cultural, generational. Here was an afternoon where none of those fractures mattered, where what mattered was a hole in the dirt, a lavender plant, and a child's laugh. Let us go back to the beginning one final time. King Charles leaning in. Are you mixing that into the mouth, or is this? And then the laugh. The child's laugh. Immediate, total, genuine. Why has this moment been shared millions of times? Why are people who have never thought about Harlem Grown and who have no particular opinion about the British monarchy stopping to watch this on their phones? Because we are desperately hungry for unscripted joy. We have become so accustomed to public life being a performance. Politicians performing concern, celebrities performing relatability, institutions performing humanity, that when something genuinely spontaneous and funny and warm happens in a public space, we cannot look away. A king was confused about what a child was doing with some dirt. The child laughed. The king laughed. The garden laughed. Nobody planned that. Nobody could have planned that. And that is exactly why it matters. Now here is where we get practical, because this viral moment carries a responsibility with it. Harlem Grown is doing extraordinary work, but like all grassroots community organizations, they do it with heart that far exceeds their resources. If you watched this and felt something, if you laughed at the homework girl, if you were moved by the circle of love, if you smiled at the lavender named Steph Curry, look up Harlem Grown. Read about what they do. If you are able to support them, support them. The work of Harlem Grown is bigger than one viral royal visit. It was happening before King Charles showed up, and it will keep happening long after the cameras have moved on. By the end of the visit, King Charles had fed chickens, planted lavender, learned about hydroponic systems, observed chips made from basement-grown lettuce, met affordable housing developers, been cheerfully corrected by a girl proud of her homework habits, and survived a child's completely uninhibited laughter at his attempt to understand what was happening with the dirt. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, there was a feeling, perfectly preserved even through all the wonderful chaos of children and gardens and cameras and royal security. The feeling of a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be, not because it was on the itinerary, but because it was real. We started with a king confused about dirt. We ended with something much bigger. We ended with a story about community, about sustainability, about children who have not been taught to be small in the presence of power. We ended with a story about what it looks like when the world's most formal traditions meet the world's most organic joy. Before you click away, 3 things. First, subscribe to Royal Report Daily. If this kind of storytelling, the kind that finds the real story underneath the viral moment, is something you value, hit that subscribe button. Second, share this video. Share it with someone who needs a laugh today. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that joy is still out there. And third, tell us in the comments. What would you name your lavender plant? We are reading every single one. King Charles went to Harlem and came back laughing. That is the story. That is the whole beautiful, funny, moving, hopeful story. Thanks for watching. And we will see you in our next report right here on Royal Report Daily.